Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. I am Dan Lush, joined this week by Mike Lawson and John Nucci. Dan Wallach, we'll say, is on hiatus. Dan Wallach is he's back in Russia. I was telling someone about this, Mike and John, and they're like, so wait, that's not a bit, like he wasn't actually, like he actually goes to Russia? And I'm like, it's a long story. Dan has family there. But that opens the chair this week to two of my favorites. So Mike, John, what's up, boys?
How's it going?
How you doing, Ed?
John, we joked last time. I'm like, when did the bar results come back? And you're like, a couple months. And I'm like, I have a feeling we'll have you back on before then with some golf news. Little did we know, it was the very next episode. So topics this week, we're going to do Patrick Reed's defamation lawsuit with the Golf Channel. It is so crazy that we are saying it, but we will get into it. Trevor Bauer is back. He has filed, which we have covered in the past, a defamation lawsuit against that San Diego accuser. A very heavy and we'll say eye-opening counterclaim with some new information about Trevor Bauer, maybe shedding some light as to why he was suspended for a full 2 years. The Ben Simmons Grievance saga, a story that we covered once upon a time, has now reached a logical conclusion. And a guest this week, Freezing Cold Takes is back. Fred Segal, former lawyer, now full-time author, has joined us. He has a book out. We will get into it. But yeah, it is where we are. I don't know, guys. We had like a whirlwind week of sports all last week between Watson and LIV. I know we're still on Watson watch. We're expecting a decision or a settlement, something on the suspension. Expected it this week. So Dan and I had been holding this episode. Now it's been longer than anyone expected with an expedited time frame. So now we are we have an episode to do, a non-Watson episode. So where do we want to start? We want to start with Bauer. We want to start with Patrick Reed. The floor is open.
Dan, let's start with Bauer. Trevor Bauer. Let me lay this out a little bit. Let's go backwards, right? So Trevor Bauer, let's talk about the punishment. Trevor Bauer received basically a 2-year suspension from Major League Baseball. It's 324 games. He has since appealed that. Why he got that suspension, Rob Manfred has the authority under the collective bargaining agreement that was implemented in 2015. The policy is called their Joint Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Policy. So that gives him the authority, even though, and we're going to talk about this, even though there was no criminal charges filed, there was no criminal complaint, no felony complaint. So that's where currently Bauer stands. He's being suspended. If he goes the entire suspension, he'll lose about $60 million of his contract with the Dodgers. This is all back in 2021. Okay. So currently what's happening now is Bauer has sued the accuser that accused him of sexual assault and sexual violence, domestic violence. She filed for a restraining order in the LA Superior Court, which ultimately declined to grant her restraining order, even said that part of her request was materially misleading. Now, she has now counterclaimed Bauer's defamation lawsuit against her because she lost on that, and the district attorney in LA County did not pursue criminal charges. So Bauer's team files a defamation lawsuit. She has now counterclaimed and is alleging sexual abuse and sexual assault in the same. But this has a lot more information than we knew about, even from the hearing. So Dan, I know you were telling me about that before. So what is different about her now counterclaim to this defamation suit?
I guess one other thing that we should add, which is just a kind of a quirk of our show, the bigger our sports law show gets, the more people we meet in the sports law realm. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but I know both attorneys on opposite sides of the aisle. So John Federloff representing Trevor Bauer, and the law firm of Friedman and Tatelman on the opposite side representing the accuser. And her name is Lindsey Hill. This is a public filing. So I think we can say it now. It's not like a Deshaun Watson situation. So I know both sides of the aisle, so I'll try to just be fair and objective here. And I can only speak from my personal perspective. With respect, and Mike, and I remember you and I did a long episode on this, like we were trying to figure out why exactly Trevor Bauer was suspended for 2 years when that's never happened in baseball history before, right? Guys like, I think we were talking about Stephen Wright, former Red Sox pitcher, was like actually charged with a crime and he wasn't suspended for a year. So I'm like, I don't know, Trevor Bauer's not, wasn't charged with a crime, as you pointed out, right? We're just stating the facts here. A judge did say that, that Lindsey Hill's parts of her testimony were materially misleading. We'll call it like it is. I don't know why Bauer would be suspended for 2 years. Now, what we did know way back when, or I'm going to say what I know. I don't know what was publicly reported, what wasn't, but there were allegations of a previous offense that seemingly had some similarities. I think they were similar pictures of bruising with respect to Lindsey Hill. This is the San Diego. That's the case that we were talking about last year, and some older claims when Bauer was a member of the Cleveland Indians, or now the Cleveland Guardians organization. So we didn't know how similar they were, but that's how the Washington Post kind of reported, that they were similar in terms of pictures of injuries. What's coming out in this counterclaim, at least this is being alleged by Lindsey Hill's lawyers, is that one of these previous offenses, which Major League Baseball did say was part of their punishment, that was the at least insinuation, that there was an older allegation that Trevor Bauer, I can't getting into the details here, but that this prior individual was unconscious for a period of time. So people can look up the San Diego allegations, they can look up, the older allegations, but it's not our place to really get into it, but that this element of unconsciousness was similar between the two. So I'm just pointing out what the allegations are. I'm not speaking about the truth of them or whatnot, but maybe that was known by someone that filed a Freedom of Information Act request. I am not sure. I just know that I had not personally seen that before. So what's interesting is the attorney for Lindsey Hill puts that into like the procedural background section. It doesn't really have anything to do with the counterclaims of Lindsey Hill, who's the San Diego woman, but they just put it in for context and they kind of know, right? People like us are going to pick up on that story and maybe read it a little bit and maybe draw some insinuations as to why Bauer gets suspended for 2 years, from I don't know what you want to call it, but that's where we're at. I think people have posted this complaint online. My law firm is half in New York and half in California, so I was able to get a hold of the California system. And if you are looking up on Pacer, it's United States District Court, Central District of California, Southern District. So certainly people can check that out. John, I'll turn it to you before we get into the analysis here.
Yeah, I mean, Bauer is in the midst of an arbitration hearing. He's fighting that 2-year suspension. Thought it was also interesting that the new filing here seeks a jury trial too. So as you mentioned, I was kind of trying to figure out why the counterclaim, because Bauer's attorneys at least talk about how a lot of these claims may have already been litigated, and that her countersuit is maybe a regurgitation of those claims. So perhaps she is using this counterclaim maybe to tell a story, to put some new information out there that wasn't before, or maybe it's just strategy to put some pressure on Bauer.
So, John, that's a good point. And the point that you raise, I think, is the point that Trevor Bauer's attorneys, Sean Hawley and John Federloff, are raising, right? Wasn't this thing litigated before? Why are we talking about it all over again? I'm just going to read the statement verbatim just so everyone has the full picture. Lindsey Hill's claims were judicially disproven last August following a hearing regarding a DVRO petition, that's domestic violence restraining order petition, filed in bad faith. She, quote, materially misled, close quote, the court and could not meet the lowest burden of proof in our justice system because her claims were false. She's being sued for defamation to be held accountable for her lies and the damage it has caused. Her countersuit is a regurgitation of her judicially disproven claims and yet another attempt by Ms. Hill to defame Mr. Bauer and seek profit from her lies. Strong statement, very strong statement. This is a defamation suit, right? So in order to prove defamation, you need to show, right, for a public figure, that the person made those claims knowing they were false. They knew they were false, yet they made them anyway. So maybe that statement seems harsh, but if you file a defamation lawsuit, you need to show that the other side lied. That's why you have it a couple times. A DVR petition filed in bad faith. Ms. Hill seeks to defame Mr. Bauer and seek to profit from her lies, right? She's being sued for defamation to be held accountable for her lies. So that's the statement from the attorneys you have to expect who have filed a defamation lawsuit. So again, it's tough, but that's the nature of the beast at this point.
And they're talking about burden of proof here. So this was a preponderance of the evidence versus beyond a reasonable doubt. So you have these different levels of proof that need to be shown for the restraining order aspect of it. Now she's bringing it into the civil side of it, which has a higher burden of proof. And I think what's interesting here is Jeremy Evans made a comment, and I know you're pulling this from
friend of the show, Jeremy Evans.
Friend of the show, Jeremy Evans. He made a comment. I know you're talking about that Forbes article, and he said that this was a strategic play by her, right? So this is a way for her to tell her story to a jury, right? The only time that she's actually been able to tell anyone is in the DVRO, the domestic violence restraining order, and the restraining order that she was trying to get. She ultimately failed, but that was a 4-day hearing. And that's really the judge was the only one that heard her and the other side, obviously. So she wants to tell a jury, right? If there's one way to beat defamation, it's the absolute truth. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation. You said it perfectly. They have to show that she knew that this was a lie, actual malice. They have to show that she knew that this was false and she still made these claims. Right now, it's a he said, she said. Obviously, Bauer's side has had a little bit more of a winning streak here because she lost in the restraining order. She lost in the DVRO, and the district attorney failed to file any criminal charges. But this is a way for her to go to civil trial, speak in front of a jury, tell her side of the story, And if the jury believes her, then true is an absolute defense for her claim with the defamation suit.
It's almost like doubling down. So, I mean, just let's, a legal podcast, we're getting a little bit of procedure here. This could have been filed as a separate lawsuit. This also could have been filed before Bauer filed his defamation suit. I remember, Mike, we spent so much time with this last summer, and I'm like, just because, and it's really the same argument we're hearing with Deshaun Watson, right? Deshaun Watson was, put in front of 2 grand juries, no criminal charges, okay? Separately, right? Like, I don't know, a couple months later, a judge, a former Delaware judge, Sue Robinson, she finds that sexual assault did occur. So, we're not going to get into the weeds of Deshaun Watson, but the judge found that sexual assault occurred on a kind of a higher standard, this preponderance of the evidence that was used by those Texas grand juries. So, like, you can't really make sense of that other than, like, it's like, we're all kind of betting guys, at least the 3 of us, right? It was like a different forum, different stadium, different day, different result. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense. So, when she lost at the DVRO hearing in front of that judge, we said at the time, like, it's not stopping her from filing a civil lawsuit against him. It's not. I mean, maybe it's probably, and I remember I spoke to Forbes at the time. I said, there's probably no DA that's going to take this case, but it's not going to stop her if she wants to tell the story from filing a civil lawsuit. So what happened, right? There was almost a race to the courthouse. The defamation lawsuit was filed first. And now this lawsuit could have been filed separately, but instead it was filed as a counterclaim. If it was filed separately, there probably would have been a motion to consolidate these 2 into one case. So they're just saving one element of procedure. So, Mike, to your point, and John, the point that you raised, this counterclaim and there are 2 counts. It's battery and sexual battery. They're almost being filed as a defense to defamation, because if you can prove that the sexual battery or the battery occurred, in some sense, right, you're showing that you weren't lying about the claims. So, it's, I don't know how to phrase it, but it's like someone's lying, right? Like, both of these things can't be true, right? Defamation couldn't have happened if the sexual battery happened. So you have these 2 kind of cars on a collision course. The question that I've been getting on this particular case, is this case going to settle, or is it going to be one that goes to trial? And it's the same question that I get asked on every case. But like, for Bauer's purposes, he filed the defamation case because he's not currently able to make a living off of what he's very good at. So the defamation case was a necessity to save his career. So I think this is, Mike, just like you explained, an opportunity for Trevor Bauer to tell his side of the story. And now Lindsey Hill's name is out there. Her attorneys are putting it out there, right? Now she wants to put herself in the public realm with once again, with a civil counterclaim telling her story. So this is one of these cases. Could it settle? Sure. But the percentage of this case settling is certainly much less than our standard normal case, because you have 2 sides that are accusing the other ones of lying, and no one wants to blink. So yeah, I mean, that's where we stand.
This isn't his only avenue of recourse either. So Bauer has ongoing defamation lawsuits against Deadspin and The Athletic for their published articles about these allegations as well. And he's appealing the suspension, right? So John, you mentioned
keeping the lawyers busy.
Yeah, absolutely. They are working around the clock for him.
I think this is probably as good of a part of any. We've been spending a lot of time talking about defamation. We don't plan the news this way. It's just how it works out. John, we joked, right, that like this is the most golf law news that has popped up. I think people, I'm going to let you do the Patrick Reed history. Patrick Reed is not, he's a major winner, but I don't think he's necessarily like considered a major player on the golf scene. But this story has picked up a lot of legs and has, made the rounds in just the general sports law circle. So, John, you're our resident golf guy, and I want to give you your credit. John is now not just a sports radio veteran, he's now an international sports radio veteran. John, what did you do over the weekend? You did Sportsnet?
I did, yeah. I did at 590 Sportsnet up in Toronto. It was called The Golf Show. So that was great. It was a lot of antitrust talk, kind of looking forward as to what we can expect with the LIV golfers versus PGA Tour looking ahead.
So listen, just don't let your head get too big, okay? Listen, this is your roots. You're over here in Conduct, okay? They're going to try to poach you. Just hang with the boys over here. Give people that don't know Patrick Reed kind of a background onto who he is. He's kind of like the bad boy of golf, kind of an unlikable fellow. But I find this lawsuit humorous on the one hand, but then again, it's like, I don't know, we're talking about blood money and whatnot. So there's some, I don't want to say there's teeth to the lawsuit, but the story is at least fascinating. But John, go ahead. You have the floor. Talk a little bit about Reed and where we're at with this lawsuit.
Yeah, so Patrick Reed, he's American golfer. He's center of a lot of controversy in his career. He, all the way back to college, there was a 2015 book published by Shane Ryan, who's a Golf Digest contributor. Even back then, his teammates at Georgia were accusing him of knowingly playing the wrong ball in a better spot, stealing a watch and a putter and cash from his locker room.
Wait.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was actually dismissed from the team, University of Georgia team, 1 year in, and he transferred to Augusta State where he finished up. But I mean, those were clear excerpts from a book from 2015. So that was the beginning of his collegiate career, at least, and then had a couple of scandals throughout his career on the PGA Tour, most notably 2019, where he allegedly kind of improved his lie in a bunker and was called out for it. And then again, I think it was 2020 or 2021, where he picked up his ball before a rules official got there. He's just a guy that's been a media target, kind of a center of controversy for his entire career. Kind of like walking in front of somebody's line, which is another thing that we saw last week. So
we should mention that, John, while we are here. John, you didn't just go on Sportsnet and have a week where you're going on sports radio around the country. You got a tweet that was picked up by the New York Post and like pseudo kind of went viral.
So essentially at the tournament, after the rumors of Cam Smith leaving to LIV appeared on the broadcast, at least, and it looks like it was true, that Scotty Scheffler kind of walked right in Cam Smith's line as he was lining up a putt.
Like 2 holes before that, he made like a eagle putt or a birdie putt, and he was like all about it. He was dapping him up, and they was like all excited, and then he does that.
I do want to point out is that John sent me this, and he said, "This, look at this clip, isn't it interesting?" And it had about 2 likes. Okay, and then I looked back like an hour later. What was your final count, John? Like 5,000?
It was at 2 million something views last time I saw.
Oh my! So John, this is a good lesson for the listeners. If you think that you've spotted something, you think it's interesting, just put it out on the internet. John also sent me one of our first meetings that you and I ever had. You sent me a video, and you're like, "This is my most viral video." Do you know what I'm about to say?
My dog.
John was walking his like little toy poodle, and there must like a puddle or something. And
I need to clarify, this is my grandmother's little dog, not my own. But
it would be a little weird because John, you're kind of a big guy, right? You can't have like a little toy poodle you're walking around with.
Dan, don't you have a little toy poodle?
I have a mini golden doodle. Respect, don't slander my dog here. But yeah, John picked the little vest on and a little leash, and you picked the dog up, and I'm like, it's like a 5-second clip. John, what was that? Like 10 million views?
Oh yeah, that was up to about 10 million. That blew up.
I don't know what you have, like the Midas touch for these things, but neither here nor there. Yeah, I mean, you picked that up. And by the way, before we forget, Cam Smith, since you and I recorded our episode, I remember Jody Balsam was on, and she's like, "Is that Cam Smith thing confirmed? Did I miss some news?" And I'm like, I don't know. Everyone's talking about it. It seems to be true. And then in between our 2 episodes, Cam Smith was asked directly, "Are you leaving and going to LIV?" And he's like, "No comment." And I'm like, okay. If you were not going to LIV, that's the opportunity to deny this, Mr. Smith. So the other funny thing, right, in the middle of all this, the FedEx, Cup playoff start, and I was speaking about bad beats and betting. Saturday night ends, and I'm like, who am I going to bet on Sunday? I'm all excited. I'm looking. I'm like, Cam Smith is among the leaders. Great storyline, and I knew we were probably going to cover him in some sense. So I'm like, okay, Cam Smith minus 11. Let me look. Okay, odds to finish in the top 10 were like minus 150. It was like minus 160. It was like a good bet. So I lay some money. I bet Cam Smith top 10. I get a notification about 5 minutes later that Cam Smith has been penalized for moving a ball. Actually, I think I was notified, John. Was it Sunday morning?
It was actually after the round had started on Sunday.
After the round started, that he lost 2 shots. So I don't know who's going to tell me this. If we're talking about PGA having like anti-competitive practices and being investigated by the Department of Justice, Cam Smith, the guy that just won the British Open, the number 2 golfer in the world, finishes his round on Saturday. And while the action starts on Sunday, just before he's about to tee off, phantomly loses 2 shots. I don't remember something like that happening in golf. Isn't there like a statute of limitations where a score can be corrected?
It is interesting, and that 2 shots actually did make your top 10 bet not hit, I believe.
I'm well aware, and I did not get
finished. I want to say you finished 13th, and it would have been more like 5th or something.
I'm very aware that this cost me a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, next time don't put your ball on a penalty line.
Next time they should probably say it before the bettors bet on it. But as to let's get back to Reed for a second, right? Okay, so that was a fun detour for our golf fans, which I'm told there are more since your previous appearances, John. So lay us out. Okay, so Patrick Reed is the bad boy of golf. People don't like him. Can you just get to the core of what is being alleged with respect to the Golf Channel of all places?
As if Reed wasn't disliked enough by the golf world, he filed a lawsuit in the Southern District of Texas against Brandel, Chamblee, and the Golf Channel. Chamblee is an analyst for the Golf Channel. Claims are essentially that those 2 conspired, along with the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan, PGA Tour commissioner, in a quote, defamatory agenda intended to inflict severe damage on Reed, close quote. All of this has been going on, he claims, since he was 23 years old. And all of that essentially led to a constructive termination from the PGA Tour. And he is seeking $750 million in damages.
And John, who does Patrick Reed play for now?
Patrick Reed is currently a LIV golfer.
LIV golf. So this is our 12th, 11th LIV golfer in the courthouse right now?
Yes, 12th. Actually 11th technically, because
11th.
We had one drop out of the last lawsuit.
Can I ask a dumb question? This term that you just used, John, constructive termination. I know what it means to me. What does it mean to you? Constructive termination from the PGA Tour.
It's actually interesting because constructive termination is basically that he was kind of forced out and had no choice but to leave. That he was being pressured so much and just getting kind of just abused on a daily basis that he had no choice but to leave. But the complaint actually states several times that Reed, they use the word chose to play for another league and is therefore not destroying the game of golf. So making a choice to play for another league seems inconsistent with the language earlier that they used about constructive termination, which implies there was no choice.
Especially when they pay you more to go to the other league. That seems like you made some type of conscious choice. And especially, right, wasn't Reed one in the second or third waves of defections? Didn't he move with, was it Brooks that he came with? It was like the same.
He was pretty early. He didn't play in the first LIV event. He did play in the second one. So he was a little bit later.
So conveniently, he went after the first wave of guys went. So got it. You were forced to go, but you didn't go immediately. You waited until the timing was right. Totally understood. But go ahead.
Yeah, so most of the allegations are that those two have been misreporting information, false information, or just a total reckless disregard for the truth with actual malice and essentially actively targeting him to destroy his reputation and create hate and a hostile work environment that forced him to leave. There is kind of a pretty funny part of that complaint that I cannot repeat in there now, but there's an entire paragraph where he goes over all of the things that fans have yelled at him on the course over the years that he claims are all the result of Brandel, Chamblee, and the Golf Channel.
Again, so truth is an absolute defense. Again, we've already said that with defamation. It's a very tricky area of the law, defamation suits. But it's just interesting to me on the constructive notice as it's paired up with defamation and actual malice under defamation.
I have to add this. I don't know why, John, why you don't want to read these. This is like the funniest part of the complaint. So part of defamation, you have to show that someone's lie, similar to what we were just talking about with respect to Bauer. Actual malice, you have to prove that it was, malicious, that they did it on purpose, right? But you also have to prove that those lies caused some type of harm, proximate cause. Listen, we'll see what discovery bears out. My gut is that this is not a successful claim, but I've been wrong before. This is my favorite part. It's paragraph 17 and 18 of the complaint. If anybody wants it, obviously just reach out to us. We have it. It says, as a proximate result of the defamation set forth below and herein, okay? So as a result of what they just explained that the Golf Channel did, as John laid out, it induced certain personal attacks. Okay, so what are the attacks that it induced? John, this is the best part, okay? These induced personal attacks include, but are not limited to, quote, now on the tee, the excavator, quote, you suck, quote, you effing suck, quote, you jackass, quote, you coward, quote, you piece of whatever, quote, no one likes you. So I'm like, hey,
are you quoting the script of Happy Gilmore?
I guess so. These, I can go on. These are really, quote, everyone hates you, you cheater. Quote, you cheater. Those have nothing to do with like the attacks from the Golf Channel. Like, I'm sure people hate Patrick Reed and it has nothing to do with the coverage of the Golf Channel. The Venn diagram of people that are yelling, you suck and you effing suck. It's probably not a full circle with respect to the people that watch the Golf Channel. I know that people hate Patrick Reed. I don't really watch the Golf Channel. I hate to admit it. I can't believe this made it into a complaint. Quote, everyone hates you, you cheater. Quote, you're going to miss this, you cheater. What is Patrick Reed taking out? Like, was someone's watching these events and taking notes on what people are yelling at him? Where do they get this from?
I think my favorite in here, which I don't even know what it means, but it's there's one quote is, why don't you introduce your children to their grandparents?
How about this?
I don't even know what that means.
Sorry, Webb, for having to play with the cheat. Who did you piss off? This is so funny. This is just a sampling of what defendants maliciously and intentionally caused, and further with actual notice. What do they're actually alleging? And I'd love to hear like the opening arguments if this ever got to the trial. This would be the trial of the golf century.
Yeah.
They knew this would impact his golf performance. Like this, I mean, I don't know, John, and you had a tweet that obviously you're in the weeds of this. You dug up a quote from the lawyer for Patrick Reed, who about 6 months ago had basically said the opposite about the Golf Channel.
Not only just the opposite about the Golf Channel, he sent a tweet like full on supporting Brandel Chamblee for his statements on the Golf Channel about LIV Golf and its source of funding. So he has seemingly done a complete 180 now that one of those golfers is willing to pay for his services, which are underwhelming to say the least based on the complaint, because it is just riddled with typos.
I think it's just a comedy hour. I think it's just one of the funniest things I've ever read.
Speaking of claiming the attorney, it's worth noting he actually sued the PGA Tour last month as an individual, claiming that all their suspensions of LIV golfers kind of harmed his enjoyment of going to the 3 events that he was supposed to go to. So he's just a serial. It seems like he sued past presidents, news networks, media outlets. He's quick on the trigger.
Well, here's the thing. And I mean, for anyone that's listening to this, I mean, this is the issue of being a lawyer on Twitter that's representing people in the space that you're commenting on. Obviously, this guy's a huge golf fan. He's suing the PGA and he's commenting about the, golf analysts, their comment of LIV Tour, right? What you say on Twitter can and will be used against you. So I don't know, John, now you dug it up again. I'm not sure. When I saw you found that, it was maybe like 2 or 3 quote tweets. I'm sure with your little Midas touch, it probably blew up overnight. It's a lawsuit we follow. It's another one, just, I don't know, to close the loop on Reed. He's suing for a massive amount of damage. What's the number, John? Is it 100 million?
It's 100 million times 7.5. So he's suing for $750 million.
There's no chance in hell that Patrick Reed would make $750 million, right? That's Tiger Woods' money if he defects to go to LIV. It just, the number doesn't seem to make sense. But like, I don't know. At the end of the day, a judge is going to ask, right? Okay, he was forced to go to LIV because of this terrible criticism he's receiving in the PGA Tour. We talked about it ad nauseum on last episode. The LIV golfers are, at least a judge found, right, in the antitrust case, or at least the TRO, that a judge, is saying that that they might be making more money with LIV. So I don't know. Let's close it on this, John, while we're still on golf talk. Mike, you brought this to my attention. I think it's been well reported that Tiger spoke to the troops with respect to LIV. Mike, you want to fill everybody in on Tiger's low-key tag team partner that no one would expect?
So the memes were going wild about Tiger coming in to save the day, speaking to the PGA troops, just talking about PGA versus LIV. And he gets off the plane, he gets in the car, and who's in the car? Ricky Fowler. Him and Ricky Fowler are going to this meeting. It takes 2 to tango, I guess, and they are coming in. I was expecting some bright pink outfits from the both of them, but it was pretty muted, both of them. Tiger looked very serious as he was walking off the plane.
Mike, did you happen to see that Tiger was driving the car too? I thought that was it.
Tiger was driving the car. He did, but Ricky's in the passenger seat.
Well, listen, this is like a Batman Robin situation. Yeah, Batman and Superman.
Ricky's not driving.
And Ricky's probably a pretty good Robin if we're trying to cast the Robin here. In golf circles, I think some news is trickling out of what happened. The other one that's been very vocal on the PGA LIV front is Rory. And John, you are all over the golf scene. Any word on what Rory said about Tiger's message to the troops?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Somebody asked Rory about the meeting, I should say. And they asked if Tiger took a leadership position or was he just kind of, one of the guys there talking. And Rory's quote was, "I think it's pretty apparent that whenever we all get in the room, there's an alpha in there and it's not me."
I mean, it's not really a comment that you'd like to be hearing from someone that wants to be the top golfer in the world. You want to be the alpha, but listen, there can only be one Tiger Woods. Okay, so let's put a pin in the golf conversation. Let's move over to Simmons quickly. I'm not sure how much there is here, and then we'll go over to Fred Segal and Freezing Cold Takes. John, why don't you lead us off just with the background on Ben Simmons, just so for people that haven't been following it as closely.
Yeah, so Simmons, as I'm sure some people know, he was with the Sixers for a while. A couple of years ago, he demanded a trade and then essentially didn't show up. And then when he did show up, just kind of refused to play. He basically said he wouldn't play until he was traded. The Sixers considered it a breach of his contract. They started withholding the per game salary for each game he missed. Simmons ended up citing his mental health as his reason for not participating in team activities, but the Sixers claimed that their doctors were not given proper access. And then even after he was traded, he still hasn't played. Didn't play for the Nets either since he's traded. So the two sides entered into an arbitration process, but it appears that they have now settled before that judgment came down.
I'll jump in here. This is, and I don't know how much there is from a legal standpoint, but it's a grievance that was filed by Simmons, which I thought was just kind of a funny grievance at the time. I remember when it was filed, it was just like, okay, so the guy claims that he wants a trade and doesn't show up, which has happened before. Guys have demanded a trade and they don't show up, and they get fined for not showing up, or they want a new contract and they don't show up. Like maybe a good example, a recent one is Melvin Gordon with the Chargers. He wanted a new contract, he didn't show up, or Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers. Like it happens before. So Simmons did something new, and I think you could only probably do this in 2022. So he tried a new method. Right. There's like the OJ methods, like if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit, like come up with a good rhyme and maybe you can get off. Ben Simmons shows up to camp. And remember, I remember the playoffs very well. Doc Rivers accused, and Joel Embiid kind of blamed him for the Sixers playoff loss. So he demands a trade, Clutch Sports, they can't get a deal done. And there's all this talk about holding out, they're going to fine him, whatever. So he shows up and he's wearing sweatpants and he's got like a cell phone in his pocket at practice. And then like the next day he's not able to play. And he claims that he had a mental illness and was unable to play. So Simmons used a new excuse, the first time I've ever heard of it, and I haven't heard of it since, that he was unable to practice or play because of a mental disability. So I think people said like, okay, athletes have, mental strains all the time from playing, and it's tough to play with athletes, and people have demanded new contracts and trades all the time. It's the first time someone is saying I'm physically able of playing, but I just can't play because of a mental issue. John, wasn't there some like nonsense when the Sixers were looking to speak to his doctor and they were refusing access, something like that?
Yeah, that was after he cited his mental health as his reason for not participating. The Sixers kind of countered that may be true, but that the team doctors were not actually given proper access to Simmons. So they were never able to evaluate or affirm any of those claims.
I mean, so whatever. Then we go from mental illness to like a back issue. So, he's got to pick his poison. I don't know if it's mental illness or it's a back issue. And the back issue all of a sudden flared up at a time, which is, as John, you mentioned, he did not play for the Sixers at all. So I'm not sure how he hurt his back, right? Did he hurt it just sitting on the bench, right? I have no concept. So then, as just to, fill out the time frame, he ends up getting a trade in the James Harden deal to the Nets. He doesn't play for the Nets. Everyone expects him to play at some point, help them with their playoff push. And he doesn't see the court at all. So I don't know what this back injury was. Maybe it's a career-ending back injury. I have no concept of what it is. The story, Ben Simmons popped up in the news about 2-3 weeks ago, that I guess the Nets players wanted him to play during Game 4, and apparently they were making some comments to him on the Nets players group chat. And in a Ben Simmons-esque move, reportedly, he just left the group chat. If you're wondering why Kyrie was trying to reportedly angle for a move to the Lakers, and Durant is in a staring contest with the Nets demanding a trade, being linked to the Suns among a number of teams. I think the Pelicans I saw.
Linked to the Sixers too.
Linked to the Sixers. It's because Ben Simmons, right, the star asset in the James Harden deal, doesn't want to be there. So anyway, Mike, what do you think what do you take away from this grievance? I mean, it's important to talk about, but what do you take away from it?
We're not going to know what it settled for. It was allegedly that the grievance was for $20 million because he was getting fined basically $1.3 million for every paycheck, added up to like $20 million. They settled for it. I think what's interesting, before I get into like a little bit of a takeaway, Bleacher Report released last week a rework of the 2016 draft. Ben Simmons was the number 1 overall pick. They dropped him all the way to 5. What they reworked it. So they put Ingram, who was originally 2, they put him at 1. They put Jaylen Brown, who was 3. They bumped him up to 2. They put Jamal Murray, who was originally 7. They put him at 3. They put DeJounte Murray, who was originally 29th at the end of the first round. They put him at 4. And then they put Simmons all the way to 5. So, I mean, he just hasn't played like well.
I'm surprised he only dropped to 5.
I know this was 5 days ago, so maybe this gets bumped a little bit more. But what we have is this precedent that's being set now. We saw the holdouts. We've seen it before. We saw it with Harden. We've seen it with other big star players. Kyrie refusing to play for whatever their reasoning is. Kyrie was COVID. Harden wanted to force the trade. But this sets a precedent now that you can file a grievance. You can breach your contract by refusing to play. And then now you can go back and file a lawsuit for the lost money from that breach of contract and just settle it because the team doesn't even want to handle it or deal with it anymore. So I don't see that as a good precedent moving forward. And I hope teams and players don't look for it that way. If he actually had some sort of mental health illness, he couldn't play, that would have been from the get-go, and he would have been met with the team doctors. He would have had the legitimate process to go through. This is just kind of like he figured out this as he was going, and he still hasn't played for the Nets. So I don't know what is going on with Simmons besides just causing chaos in the East.
Well, I guess in 2022, if you claim, right, that you had a true mental illness and a mental inability to play, no one's going to call you out for it. And we don't know what that settlement was, but the fact that he can walk away, I think, with anything tells you that, like, there was some effectiveness. So, listeners of our show know that my firm works with NFL players. We've settled things before. We don't talk about them, right? Usually if you're going to settle a case, it's not rocket science. There's some quid pro quo, some consideration coming back. So, we're not going to know what that amount of money is, but the fact that Simmons was able to get anything from our vantage point seems to be a pure holdout situation. Is it the brain? Is it the back? Which is it? Why is he never able to play? I think, and just to put a pin on it, I think the fact that Simmons didn't play for the Nets on a back injury was kind of like a way for him to try to say he was legitimately unable to play for the Sixers. But we'll say some creative arguments seem to have closed the book on the Sixers chapter.
That kind of puts a pin in it for Simmons. That's the end of it. I don't think we're ever going to know the settlement amount. They're not going to release that. But we do have a very, very special guest. He is famous. You know him on Twitter as Freezing Cold Takes. He is now an author, has a book. You can go check it out. It's on Amazon. But before we send it to him, I think it's perfect that Bleacher Report came out with that article. Freezing Cold Take now is probably just a picture with the 2016 draft and Simmons going number 1 to the 76ers.
I think that's fair. So without further ado, let us kick it to Fred Segal in his new book, Football Media's Most Inaccurate Predictions and the Fascinating Stories Behind Them. Let us kick it over to Fred Segal. Fred Segal, Freezing Cold Takes. Welcome back to Conduct Detrimental. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
So I'm sitting here with a copy of your book, Football Media's Most Inaccurate Predictions and the Fascinating Stories Behind Them. I think the last time you were on our show was maybe close to a year ago. I'm like, can I promote that your book is in the works? And you're like, no, don't do that. Wait until it's out. So here we are, attorney turned author. And now I got this book sitting in front of me. So before we get into some, the fun chapters of this book and maybe some legal tie-ins, what's the process of transitioning from attorney to author? That's got to be pretty big.
I haven't been practicing law for years, for like 4 years, 5 years. So right now it wasn't as difficult as if I just left being a lawyer to go do it. But I think that being a lawyer has helped me. I mean, it made me be able to use like the Freezing Cold Take Twitter feeds and be able to do it so quickly based on just researching what I used to research, a lot of stuff on Westlaw and LexisNexis. And you get really good at figuring out what to use as the search terms. And I used to do that with Twitter with the cold takes. And then it really helped looking up articles, and a lot of the stuff in the book predates the internet. And then some of the stuff in the book predates social media, but not the internet, but like still you have to look in newspapers. So I think that, and I think writing, when I was a lawyer, I wrote all the time, and I used to get everything sent back to me, like with all the red lines, and it helped me with the grammar and just the sentence structure, and just being able to write something and make sure that everything that you've written is explained previously, so there's nothing that nobody understands. And I think that that's really, like, when you're a lawyer, you're always thinking about that, because there's like, so that's really kind of like something that I didn't have to think about when I was doing it. I think when writing a book, like, you have to write it a lot differently in terms of you have to make it more interesting. As a lawyer, you're writing much more methodically.
We can talk about the book all we want. I mean, that's the boring lawyer stuff. But people like you, Fred, right? Because you are the man behind maybe the most exciting account on all of Twitter. But the reason I asked you about this transition from lawyer to author, I'm sure, like you, my friends think they're being very funny when I have birthday parties or whatnot. They introduce me. They go, "Hey, meet Dan. He's a podcaster." And I'm like, that is not what I do. So everyone's going to calm down. I am an attorney. But for you, Fred, listen, this is a real question. I don't know the answer to this. For you, I would think now you could tell people, like, listen, you're not practicing law anymore. You could say, "Yep, what do you do?" Fred Segal, I'm an author. You could say that with a straight face.
I tell them I work on social media and I do a lot of things. But I mean, that's what I do other things. I have other freelance stuff I do that is unrelated to cold takes, but it's really not something I like even excited to talk about. It's not like exciting stuff, but I do things on social media, like odd jobs and other types of work.
I've seen your other accounts. You have This Day in Sports. You have a lot.
Oh, so yeah.
Don't
not just
undersell
those. I'm talking about things like where I do work for other companies, like run their accounts and things like that. But they're not like, they're just regular business accounts, like not like, I probably will still say it, but, and then I'll also say like I write books too.
Fred, I have some free legal advice moving forward. I think you just say Fred Segal, future best-selling author. I found the book to be very interesting, at least for what we do. We've spent a lot of time on this podcast and online and whatnot talking about the Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson. And as the time we're recording this, we're still waiting to see what the discipline or the settlement will be from the NFL. But I think it's interesting to go back through Cleveland Browns history. And your book speaks to some of these really bad takes that people have had on Browns quarterbacks that were going to be the saviors of the future, or that this guy's going to lead the Browns, whatever. So Stephanie, our lead researcher, how do you like that for a title, Steph, has gone into the Cleveland Browns folklore and gone back to look at some QBs and some records, and then could go over your fun Browns excerpt. But Steph, I'll let you kind of paint the picture for Cleveland Browns fans.
I mean, if it's hard not to know how bad the Cleveland Browns have been over the past 2 decades, 3 decades, I feel like. But it was interesting. I found that since 2000, the Browns have literally finished last in their division 14 times, last or second to last 19 times.
Yeah.
And the only 3 times that they didn't finish last or second to last, they finished second of the 4 teams and still managed to have pretty much a losing record. And so if you think back to, when everyone started talking about whether Deshaun Watson was going to go to the Browns amidst all of the uproar and scandal, I guess, that's been going on, you kind of have to think, were the Browns just willing to take that chance because there was some sort of, glimmer of hope that Watson could give them, regardless of what was, surrounding him at the time and still is, just based on their brutally terrible records of the past, however long, pretty much since they've been in existence.
Well, it's funny, Fred, and you could speak to this. Like I was going through and I knew the Browns, like obviously I know the bus. I'm very fascinated by bus and NFL history, but you go through Brandon Weeden, you go through Colt McCoy, you go through Deshaun Kaiser, you go all the way back to like Brady Quinn. Fred, I'll give you the floor. Like, I feel like the Browns have just had an incredibly bad track record with quarterbacks, like maybe worse than any team in the last like 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, ever since they rebooted the franchise in 1999, I mean, Art Modell moved them to Baltimore after 95. That was the last time they had Testaverde then and Kosar before that. So they had good quarterbacks. Then he moved them to Baltimore in 96. And then 3 years later, they started up again as an expansion franchise as the Browns in 99. They picked Tim Couch as the first pick in the draft, and he was a bust. And ever since then, they haven't had a sufficient quarterback. I mean, I feel like Baker Mayfield was probably the most successful quarterback that they had.
I was going to just run through some names, right? And I think you're right about Baker, right? Tim Couch, first round bust.
Charlie Fry, Derek
Kelly
Anderson.
Holcomb. Jeff Garcia was probably okay. He was probably somebody who played very quickly.
He was past his prime, though. I mean, he had his good years with the Niners and the Eagles.
Josh McCown. I don't know. It's true. Baker Mayfield was probably the guy, but Baker Mayfield, as we know in 2022, he's an above average quarterback. He's not a savior. So if we're trying to figure out, and Steph, as you pointed out, why the Browns, and I've told this joke. It's funny, Fred. And as a complete aside, I was playing golf with 3 friends maybe 2 weeks ago. And we were playing with a fourth, and I was explaining to him, hey, I'm a lawyer, I'm interested in sports, I'm on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. So he looks at my account and he sees, oh, you're friends with Freezing Cold Takes. He's like, I was in his fraternity. So
yeah. It's funny that those guys know that I do the Freezing Cold Takes.
He does.
I didn't talk to them. I don't know if I've talked to those guys for a long time, but I do remember who you were talking about. I didn't have to look up at Facebook to see who it was.
So it's funny. I was with him and I was with 3 friends, and this question keeps coming up. And you'll start calling, and that Watson comes up. The question is did the Browns know what would happen? Did the Browns know that these other lawsuits going to happen. The NFL might suspend him for a year. There would be a very public disciplinary hearing that the NFL would find that he committed sexual assault. Like, let's say that, and I'm sure you don't post these cold takes for obvious reasons, but the Browns said that they did their due diligence. So the question that comes up with your old buddy Mark, shout out to Mark if he ended up taking my advice listening to the podcast, but like, what is worse? If the Browns knew and still signed him to that $230 million deal, gave up those 3 first-round picks, or the Browns didn't know any of this and they're just like, you know what? We've had all these bad quarterbacks for all these years. Let's close our eyes and dive into the deep end.
I think they knew exactly what was going to happen. And I think that they're happy with it. I think that probably their biggest concern was that something else was going to come out that was like something was going to come out that was going to make the situation worse from something that they didn't already know. And I guess little tidbits have come out, but nothing that would make it so that he wouldn't play for them. But I think that they knew that he was going to be suspended for at least some time, and very likely that it could be possibly the whole season. And they just were willing to do it. I mean, Deshaun Watson wanted a contract, right, that like team couldn't get out of. That was his big deal. So the Browns, I guess, knew like you could have a guy like this for like 3 or 4 years. You could have a real quarterback.
Do you think that definitely, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of speculation about it, and I tend to agree as well. When the Browns structured the contract with just that $1 million in the first year, it was almost like they knew that he was going to be suspended for a pretty decent amount of time. And they were willing to kind of cut him the slack and structure the deal in a way that would almost compel him to come to the Browns, in the sense that they were probably one of the only teams willing to structure the contract like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's any question about it. I mean, like, I feel like it's highly likely that that's the case. I mean, I think their due diligence to see if he did anything significantly worse is going to come out than what's already been out. It's already out there.
The other thing I wanted to add, and this is from your perspective as someone that goes through the weeds, and I trust me, I went through your receipts on some of your newspaper stuff. But at least going back to your section about the Browns, which is probably my favorite chapter of the book outside of the NFL draft stuff. It's the local writers in Cleveland that are anointing Brandon Whedon as the savior and Colt McCoy, and you keep seeing it over and over again. I don't particularly know what these writers are doing now, because in their one sense, right, if you read these comments, then no one's talking about Brandon Whedon's character as a human being. And I don't see any issues with Brandon Whedon, right? Johnny Manziel, once upon a time, played for the Cleveland Browns, and there's comments from people like John Gruden in your book, like, that's the perfect mold for a quarterback in the NFL. I'm like, well, Johnny Manziel obviously had some off the field issues as well. So, you don't see comments nowadays from anybody. No one wants to make this take. Like, Deshaun Watson is a great quarterback, and once this is in the past, he will lead the Browns to a title. Like, no one wants to say those comments. And I think, Fred, maybe I'll give you, I don't know if it's credit or part of it. Like, even myself, if I have to say something that I think is maybe a little controversial, I'll save it for the podcast or a radio and audio interview, because I can put it into proper framework and give it its proper stuff. But, when you only have limited characters on Twitter, or you're writing a newspaper article, that character is lost. I know you're always internet sleuthing. Have you seen anybody, do you think anybody will dare make that take? I mean, I
think what you're going to see with Watson is just a commentary about how he's playing on the field, and nothing over, above, and beyond that. And I think with other quarterbacks, you really see narratives from the media about, like, the positive narratives from the media, whether it's this guy's gritty, this guy's great, he's a great team leader, all that kind of stuff. I don't think you're going to see that from them. And you're not going to see any redemption stories if he wins the Super Bowl. Too many of those, at least. I just think people are just going to discuss Watson as if he's playing well, at least. They're going to talk about just his playing on the field when he's playing right after the game, and that's it. Now, if he's playing poorly, he's going to get, people are not going to be afraid to criticize him if he's playing poorly. It's kind of like a Belichick thing. Media is very quick to criticize Belichick on anything, because they're not friends with them, or they're not really they don't have that big of a relationship.
And I think it was a shock to some. Depending on when you're listening to this, Watson played week 1, the NFL preseason, and looked pretty bad. And I don't think
everyone loved it. Everyone loved it.
But the people love that he played bad, but the fans in Jacksonville were chanting, and they were chanting "You sick blank." People
I mean, that'll happen at the beginning when he first starts playing again, but that'll subside eventually.
It will to some extent. I remember, well, we don't have to get into all the weeds of it, but Jason Kidd, I remember growing up and he got wife beater chants, and you go down the list, and even the Houston Astros in baseball in the not too distant past.
To this day, the Astros are still getting, but they got like Altuve really got slammed, and I think it affected him a little bit at the beginning. But I think if they're losing, it's when you'll see it. If they're losing 30-10 in Pittsburgh and it's the third quarter, the end of the third quarter, I think you'll get those chants extensively.
I guess we're the next part of your book, at least I thought we should touch upon. Listeners of our show know I used to work for the New York Giants back in the day, and you have a whole chapter dedicated to Tom Coughlin, the Giants, the Tiki Barber, Eli Manning stuff. People will now know, right? Hindsight 2020. Coughlin led the team to 2 Super Bowls, 2007 and 2011, but the narrative on Tom Coughlin, 04-05 with Tiki Barber and Strahan, was that the guy was running the team into the ground. So I guess from a personal standpoint, like, I don't think the book that you just wrote, I don't think I could write, because I know a lot of the people, like even Gary Myers has been on this podcast before, and you have some of Gary's comments, like Steve Serby. Like I was in PR, I worked with all these people, and they are on the record saying that Charlie Weiss will be the savior of the New York Giants. It's Charlie Weiss, former disciple of Bill Belichick, who you just mentioned. And like, we're at a point now, Steph and I were just talking about it, offline. Like, the bigger our little niche area of sports law gets, the more people we know, and the more people I feel bad about criticizing. Like, I won't say the name of the case, but I got called for a quote on a case where I know both lawyers, and I told the person, the entity, I'm like, I can't say anything. Someone's going to get mad at me. So I'll give somebody else can make the quote on this. So Fred, from your standpoint, are you like sitting on Ivy Tower? Do you know these people? Like how far removed are you from like these New York beat writers? You have a lot of people from, the Northeast on the Brady comments. Where do you stand on that? Or you just don't give anything? You're just like the white knight of Twitter.
I don't care. I mean, I've never met any of them in my life. I mean, I've never met him in person. Myers talked to me for a long time for the book. So a lot of those quotes from him, I mean, the quotes from him, besides the one that I'm printing from his article, are from when I spoke to him for this book. So he was perfectly fine with it. Some of the other guys didn't interview with me, but no, I don't care. I mean, these guys are calling for coaches to be fired. They're criticizing people and telling them all day. So I guess they should expect that sometimes people are going to post what they say afterwards or revert back to it if they're wrong. Some of them didn't want to talk to me. I know that, especially one of the guys about Belichick, I think. Yeah, one of the guys about Belichick really didn't want to talk to me.
This is where I find interesting, right? Like, everyone's in the hot take business in print. And this was 2004, 2005, before Twitter has really taken off. So, you mentioned earlier, right, your legal research skills. You came on our podcast last time explaining, and you don't need to reveal your secrets here, but how you can search, newspaper articles and print articles. In leading up to Coughlin, people were calling for his job left and right. And in our world, even of NFL in 2022, there are like maybe 8 teams that I feel comfortable betting on to win the Super Bowl, and those other 24, they have to come up with some form of content, right? So they're all calling for jobs left and right. So I don't know. Everyone is calling for someone's job. They have to say something. It's kind of a tough spot to be in.
Well, yeah, the Coughlin thing was, I even kind of make that clear in the book. The Coughlin thing, people thought Coughlin should be fired after 2006. So much of New York media did. The fans were calling to fire him during a game. I mean, I guess if you worked with them, you remember like in Christmas Eve in 2006, they played against the Saints and it got destroyed at home. By the end of the day, the fans were chanting to fire Coughlin. At the beginning of the 2007 season, where they won the Super Bowl, ended up winning the Super Bowl that year, they were terrible. I mean, the defense was awful. They couldn't stop anybody. And then there were more fire Coughlin chants and stuff. And I don't think anybody believed that he would go on. I mean, it was probably the most improbable playoff run you'll ever see. At least 3 of the playoff games, they must have been huge underdogs. And they were definitely underdogs all of the game, especially in the Super Bowl. They were like 2 touchdown underdogs against the Patriots, who are undefeated. I don't think anybody thought Coughlin would win the Super Bowl. And it was like deja vu in 2011, because by the time it got to 2011, it was the same thing. People were calling for Coughlin's head after the 2010 season, because 2008, 2009, 2010, they weren't very good. I don't even think did they even make the playoffs? In 2008, they were definitely on the decline. And then they won the Super Bowl again in 2011, another improbable playoff run.
I'll tell you one quick story, and then I want to get into some other aspects of the book. But I joined the Giants after the 2007 Super Bowl, so they had just won. I heard all the rumors that Coughlin would chew you up and spit you out. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. And you have some funny, anecdotes in your book about Plexico Burress saying, I'm going to, 2 weeks in advance, I'm going to be late to this meeting because my wife has an ultrasound, she's pregnant. And then he missed the meeting, and Coughlin's like, you're still fine because you missed the meeting. So that was the rep on,
he even told him in advance
right.
he was going to miss it.
Right. So that was the rep on Coughlin. Strahan, people, I think, had filed like grievances with the Players Association. It was crazy. So my boss one day goes to me and he goes, Dan, you have a new assignment. I go, what's that? He goes, I need you to wake up at 4 a.m. and I need you to deliver the newspapers to each of the departments. And I said, okay, whatever you want me to do. I'm working for the Giants, so whatever you want me to do. And he goes, and one more thing, the first newspaper needs to be hand delivered to Tom Coughlin's office. I'm like, okay, is he there? And they're like, do you think Tom Coughlin sleeps? So I would deliver a newspaper to Tom Coughlin at his office, like 4:15, 4:30. First guy in the office. That's a 1,000,000% true story. But I think he became a teddy bear later in life. He was he was nice to me. So you said in your book that he changed his ways, or after, I think it was after 2006. So certainly winning cures everything. But
yeah, those narratives always come out after they win. That's what he said that he tried to do. And players claim that they noticed.
We noticed it.
So I don't think that was a pretty common opinion. And I don't think that anybody had the opinion that he would win the Super Bowl, especially in 2007.
I'm very just curious because you've obviously, had this account for a while and you've clearly had a bunch of your tweets go viral. What freezing cold take has gone the most viral, and which one is your favorite? Not necessarily the one that's gone the most viral, or just the one where you look back and you can't believe that a sports reporter said that and then it just went completely in the opposite direction.
Well, the ones that go viral the most, like especially now, are the ones that have the look of a meme.
Right.
So let's say the one that said, this really very much could be the Knicks next year, by SportsCenter, and has pictures of Kevin Durant, Zion, and Kyrie all in Knicks uniforms.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll go viral. Like that type of stuff just goes the most viral. A lot of NBA stuff. Like NBA has this pocket of Twitter that's like big with like all that kind of stuff and memes and everything. And they really kind of just have their own little thing going. But there are some that constantly get sent to me every year, even though I've used them a million times. And under the tweet, if you look under it, I'll say I've used it a bunch of times. One of them is one that I found very early when I first started the feed. Was from 2014. Colin Cowherd wrote, it was during one of his college games, but Dak Prescott will be a backup in the NFL, period, at tight end, period.
Wow.
I highlighted that one. That was good of a segue if ever. I have a segment, first time ever on the podcast, Fred, you know of wrongful termination. We'll call this rightful termination. The book, right, is all about sports reporters whose job it is to understand football, to make predictions. Some of these are so laughably bad that, I don't know if any of these sports reporters have been fired for a take, but some of these are fireable. I mean, they are.
Yeah, because you can't fire them because you want them to be interesting. And the only way they could be interesting is just to shoot from the hip, So essentially you'd be firing them for doing things that you want them to do. So they're never going to get fired for it. I mean, if you see on TV, like they're guys who are blatantly wrong and don't care and know they're going to be wrong when they talk about things. And they're probably some of the most popular in terms of ratings wise. I don't know about popular in terms of positive feelings towards, but popular in ratings wise, people on the internet.
I have a feeling of probably the two shows that you're referencing, but
it's a lot of people. It's not just them, but they're probably the most known.
So, I mean, not necessarily that these guys would be fired, but it should be, like on Twitter, we have pinned tweets, and you promote whatever you want to promote. some of these tweets, Twitter, or maybe you're the commissioner of Twitter, it should be forced to be pinned to them. So you might have a blue check mark, but you've also had 3 of the worst takes of all time. So Kevin Flowers, who I've never heard of, with the Newcastle, Pennsylvania News in 1998, writes, quote, "Without a doubt, Peyton Manning will be the 1998 draft's biggest flop for whoever has the misfortune to draft this overrated collegiate." I mean, we'll let the quote live in oblivion, but like that was the number 1 pick. Number 2 pick is probably the biggest draft bust of all time, Ryan Leaf. So Kevin Flowers, he's not working for ESPN or Fox Sports. I'm not sure where he is, but
in that same article, and I posted it in that chapter under the defense section, he has something about Charles Woodson too.
0 for 2. Now here was another one that I thought we'll give credit where credit's due, or what's the opposite of credit? Bad credit. So Tim Brandel of CBS Sports from 2010. This one is crazy. I've never seen a prediction like this. If Tim Tebow isn't a Jacksonville Jaguar by tonight, it's my opinion the franchise is gone within 3 years. So not only is he asking Tim Tebow to be drafted by the Jaguars, which he ended up as a Jaguar at one point in time, got cut. He's saying that the franchise will be gone. That's a pretty crazy prediction.
Yeah, he thought that there's a lot. There were some more people who thought that Tim Tebow would save the franchise because it's his hometown. But like you have to be good to do that. But yeah, Brandel, he gets sent that tweet sometimes.
So Fred, I have one more. This one, as we are approaching the 2022 season, this will lead us moving forward. This is a great one from Roger Sherman over at The Ringer, one of my other favorite sites. Quote, "I would consider any team that used a first-round pick on Josh Allen to be the biggest loser of the first round. No good NFL quarterback has ever had statistics as bad as Allen's in college." So obviously that one
was a bad one.
Will live in infamy. So Fred, as we move forward, you are the king of cold takes. Now you can put this one in your next chapter of the book, or your next year of takes, whenever you do your next book. I think the Bills will win this year's Super Bowl. I know you're a very big Dolphins fan, right? I know you're from Florida. What is your prediction for the upcoming NFL season? So listen, we'll get you on here. We'll get you on Freezing Cold Takes. I want you to put a prediction on here.
Oh, it's easy to say the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl because they're probably like the favorites, right?
They are, but I've rooted for the Bills for 30 years, so can't be that much.
So I think it's going to be, let's say, the Chiefs.
Okay, you heard it here. Steph, I think, do you have any more research you want to throw on Fred, any of his cold takes? The cold takes of his cold takes?
Cold takes of his cold takes. You brought up the basketball thing. I'm a big basketball person. So that prompted me to ask, since your book is obviously, all NFL cold takes, will we potentially see a basketball version in the future at some point?
I hope so. It depends on how this book does. I would hope so. I would like to, and college football too. I mean, that would be really hard. I had a max word requirement for this book. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I left out. I mean, I could do a volume 2 for this easily because I wrote 3 more chapters that I took out.
If we could do our part, Fred, the book, if you just want to read the back cover, there's quotes from Adam Schefter, promoting the book, Rappaport, Mike Lombardi. So obviously the book is well sourced, and it was really a pleasure to read. I don't read that many hardcover books. I'm a big podcast guy, a big audiobook guy, but this one is one physically I could not put down. So shout out to your publisher, Running Press. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
That segment was brought to you by Themis Bar Review. Many of you are at home trying to figure out if you're going to pass the bar or not. I can almost guarantee you, but I can't actually say that because I'll get in legal trouble. But I can almost guarantee if you use Themis Bar Review, you're feeling much more confident than your fellow students that did not take Themis Bar Review, top bar prep company in the galaxy. Now, Fred Segal, as he mentioned, a former lawyer turned author. I don't know if Themis was around when he was there, but he can attest that, I'm sure if modern day Fred Segal took the bar, he'd be using Themis Bar Review. So, Mike, you mentioned about Ben Simmons, some freezing cold takes, and as Stephanie mentioned, perhaps maybe there is a freezing cold takes book about basketball takes on the horizon. And that is only if you give his book enough reviews, and maybe he is a New York Times bestseller at some point in time. So again, his book, Football Media's Most Inaccurate Predictions and the Fascinating Stories Behind Them. I wasn't just joking. I started reading the book to do some prep, and I couldn't put the book down. It was just hot take after hot take, and no one was safe. So yeah, definitely a good read. And I'm not just recommending it because Fred's a friend of the show. It's actually just a very good book. Okay, segment we have not done in a little bit. What to watch for doesn't mean we have stopped watching things. We just haven't done the segment. So John, lead us off, buddy. What do you got?
Yeah, my what to watch for is The Captain. Now, all episodes now streaming on ESPN. It is a really fantastic, fascinating dive into Derek Jeter, from his early career into all the way into his retirement. Just a little plug here. Jeter, for those listeners that may not know, is the all-time postseason leader in hits, singles, doubles, triples, runs, at-bats, and total bases. As you can tell, I'm also a Derek Jeter fan. So that is my what to watch for. It's a great documentary.
I just want to, got to give Jeter his props. Jeter is there's a whole, that last episode, I think they kind of ended on a weird note. Jeter's baseball career, right? I think if he never did anything else in baseball again and rode off to the sunset, congrats. Jeter's storybook ending. Jeter goes to the Miami Marlins and becomes, the part owner there. He does get credit for bringing in Kem Eng, former, assistant general manager with the Yankees. He brings her over to be their general manager, first female general manager in baseball. It is it's a huge thing. Jeter's a girl dad. They got into that in the whole last episode, which was great. Now, Jeter, they fast forwarded through this part, which I thought they should have hung a little bit. And I'm watching both of your faces. The legacy of Jeter, you can't tell the story without saying he took over the Marlins. His first major transaction, he trades Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees.
He dumped everybody.
No.
Yelich.
He dumped everyone. He dumped everyone. He traded Stanton, their prized asset, and I guess Yelich came out to be just as good of an asset later in time. But he traded Stanton to the Yankees. The optics on that were and remain really terrible. So there's no lawsuit that's filed. It's really bad. I mean, I don't know what else to put it. And Jeter's like, oh yeah, we just traded everyone. And they in the Jeter doc, they grouped them all in. They're like, Yelich, Stanton, and they didn't say Stanton went to the Yankees. I'm like, Jeter had some final cut here.
And the fact that the Marlins also absorbed a lot of his contract too.
Oh yeah, because the Yankees can't afford it. So I guess one final thing, and then I'll go to my what to watch for. If you noticed, and people that have seen the documentary, well, and if you should watch it, I think, John, I'll match you. I think it's a great what to watch for. Jeter has final cut review. So if anybody watched the Jordan doc, there are times where Jordan is looking at a monitor about like what Gary Payton said about him. And he's like looking at the monitor and he's like, the glove. And Jordan's like giving meta commentary about the documentary as it's happening. Jeter got that. I guess that's the ESPN treatment. Jeter was watching people like say bad things about him. There's some really bad comment, like a racial comment. People can watch it. But Jeter then got to roast the guy for making the comment in real time. And I'm like, this is the era of player empowerment as we know it. People can make documentaries. They're the executive producers. Casey Close, who we've talked about on this podcast, is Jeter's agent. He's the whole Doug Gottlieb saga. He's in it. So Jeter's fingerprints are all over this documentary. So, we're kind of saying, oh, they kind of fast forwarded through that Stanton part. Shocker, because Jeter was part of the team that made the documentary. So I don't know. We're not going to get any foolproof documentaries from some third parties. It looks like if you want to get a Jeter doc, a Jordan doc, a Brady doc, like those guys have to run it. So it's the world we live in. Speaking of docs where people have their fingerprints all over it. Guys, has anyone else seen the Manti Te'o documentary?
I've not seen it yet.
I don't want to get in the weeds. I don't want to spoil anything. Manti Te'o was the first and maybe only ever like sports catfish. From Hawaii, went to the University of Notre Dame. He was one of these rare guys as a defensive player, a linebacker, was in the Heisman conversation all the way to the end of the year. And there was this story going as, Notre Dame ended up playing for the national championship. Like his grandmother and his girlfriend died the same week and he's fighting through adversity and every media outlet had it. Up until the point where someone actually did some fact checking and tried to figure out who the girlfriend was. And they're like, wait, Lene Kekua? There is no Lene Kekua. She does not exist. So they do the documentary, and Te'o has really never spoken about it. Everyone's always been waiting for him to make a comment. Let's just say it is a pure catfish. The question of whether Te'o knew that he was being catfished or if he was in on the hoax, people can watch it. I mean, he had his fingerprints all over it. The question is still very much live in the internet, right? Did Te'o know or did he not know? Was he part of this to help his narrative? If you watch the documentary, it's like, no, Te'o did not know. And there's no one pushing back on him. But in any event, it is a crazy snapshot. A guy that stayed quiet for almost 20 years in the story, really hasn't spoken about it. It is excellent. That's on Netflix. It's the Untold series, which we've talked about before on the show. I would watch all of the Untold, but this Untold on Manti Te'o is fantastic. It's a 2-part series. Te'o ended up having like a solid, yet like not spectacular career in the NFL, but he was never bigger than, when he was playing for Notre Dame. And, there was talk about him being like a Hall of Fame-esque player. That was like the pedigree he had coming in. I don't know. It's crazy. Anyway, Mike, you have your what to watch for to put us in the books?
I do. We've talked about some UFC on this podcast before. We've talked about pro combat sports. John wrote an amazing piece about McGregor. We follow UFC here. So if you're interested in pro combat sports, definitely check us out. And if you're interested in writing about it, definitely send an article to us. But this Saturday, very big fight. Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. This is the second matchup. Usman is still the reigning champ. So this is a big fight. This is a huge title fight. Last week was an interesting one. Dan, I know we talked about it. A lot of dogs won on the card. So it was a tough betting matchup here. But the line here is Usman is minus 400 and Leon Edwards is plus 310. So Usman is looking to come in here and absolutely wipe the floor with Leon Edwards.
You giving a pick?
Tough not to pick Usman. I mean, he is the most deadliest striker I think I've ever seen.
John and I were talking on the last episode. I picked Usman's brother about 2 weeks ago, Muhammad Usman, winner of the Ultimate Fighter Championship. So let's roll with some Usman. So
that was a great fight.
I really bet on the dog, and that was a good dog win. Let's add this as we put this episode of the books. So for those, we sent the email out to about 150 plus of our writers that have wrote for Conduct Detrimental the first year. We did say, we launched the conductdetrimental.com era, that the next phase was incorporating people that, have contributed to the site into what we do, into a more official format. Powers of, we figured out how to create a contributor page on our website. So we said, everyone that's written for us in the past, we want to create more, the specific beat writers for sports law, baseball, sports law, basketball, sports betting legislation, combat sports, you name it. So we're going to start doing those kind of breakout rooms and little, circles, group chats, whatever you want to call it. But we're really going to try to help people network with sports law opportunities that they're passionate about, to help maybe create, to identify speakers in particular sports, be it college sports, the NIL sphere, or just jobs. We obviously in our world, in our conduct little core, we know all of you, right? The hundreds, thousands of people that are listening to our stuff, and consuming our content. But we want our core people to start meeting each other. So, we do this for fun. It is just a really, it's all I think about. We have more people that want to get involved than ever. In addition to writing, we thought we could start creating a community. So to the extent you want to get involved in any of these group chats and trying to get informed sports law kind of off of Twitter, off of social media, just have kind of conversations about it, meeting people, different, lawyers, young and old, law students, just reach out. We're happy to get you involved in that. But I think that's it. Mike, so your pick is bet the house on Usman this weekend. That's what we should leave our listeners with?
Yeah, you're just leaving money on the table if you don't.
Oh, ooh, shots fired. Okay, John, anything? Any final words here? Final words from Mike, as he might have just lost his betting credibility?
Well, I gave out a loser last week, so I have no comment on that as far as the golf pick. So no, although I will say bet Tony Finau this week. Bet Tony
Finau this week, John. You can't go loser back-to-back weeks. So eventually one of us has to hit. With that said, for Dan Wallach, myself, Mike Lawson, John Nucci, the Conduct Detrimental family, and Fred Segal, our special guest this week, we will see you next time in another episode of Conduct Detrimental.